Havenridge, The Silent Hour. Chapter 1. The Clock Strikes. The ocean always sounded different at night. Not the steady rush of waves against the shore, but something deeper, a hollow thrum, like the sea was breathing beneath the town. Clara Reyes had lived with that sound all her life. Some nights it soothed her to sleep. Other nights it felt like the town itself was whispering secrets through the tide. Tonight, the whispers pressed against the window panes of her old clapboard house on Alder Street, and Clara lay wide awake, listening. She was 32, a librarian by day and a mother always. Motherhood had sharpened her hearing, turned every creak of the floorboards and shift of the wind into a warning. But it wasn't the house that woke her. It was the clock. 3:03 a.m. The red digits glared from her nightstand. Clara blinked hard, swore she must have misread it, and then heard the small voice beside her bed. "Mom!" Her daughter, Sofia, stood in the doorway, curls tangled, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. She was 8 years old, too young to be awake at this hour, and far too calm for the words she spoke. "There's someone on the pier." Clara's body tightened. "What do you mean?" Sofia's gaze was fixed past the window, toward the faint outline of Havenridge Harbor. He's standing really still, just waiting. Clara pushed herself up, heart skipping. She crossed to the window. From here, she could see the docks, lit only by a single street lamp at the far end. The pier stretched like a crooked finger into the Atlantic Ocean. Empty. She exhaled. There's no one there, Soph. But when she turned, her daughter's eyes were wet, her voice small. "I saw him, and he saw me." The next morning, Havenridge looked like the cover of a postcard. Lobster boats bobbed at their moorings, gulls screamed overhead, and the scent of salt and frying dough drifted from Molly's Diner on Main Street. The summer crowd hadn't arrived yet, and the town felt both sleepy and restless. Clara moved through it with practiced ease, dropping Sofia at school, stopping by the library before it opened, exchanging nods with neighbors who'd known her since childhood. Havenridge was that kind of place, where everyone remembered your birthday, your heartbreaks, and your mistakes. At the library, she sorted through the new arrivals cart, half listening to the hum of the dehumidifier in the basement. Life had settled into a rhythm she could manage, a job that kept her close to Sofia, a town that felt safe, if a little too small. Until Sheriff Olson stopped by. He was a broad-shouldered man, his uniform always dusted with salt from the docks. Clara had gone to school with his older sister. He leaned on the counter, voice low. "You hear about Pete Garvey?" Clara frowned. "The fisherman? Lives by the wharf?" "Yeah. Didn't come in with his boat this morning. His crew swears he was out there last night, but no one's seen him since. No sign of him at home either." Something in Clara's chest tightened. She remembered Sofia's words, whispered in the dark. "Someone on the pier." The sheriff sighed. "Could just be he sailed out early. Pete's known to do that. Still, if you hear anything, let me know." By the time Clara picked up Sofia from school, Havenridge was already buzzing. At the diner, voices rose over clattering plates. At the docks, fishermen traded theories with furrowed brows. In a small town, one disappearance was enough to stir the waters. That night, Clara sat on the porch, watching the harbor lights flicker against the waves. Sofia curled beside her with a book, but every few minutes her gaze drifted to the pier. "Mom?" she asked softly. Yes? Sofia's voice was almost a whisper. I don't think people remember him. Clara looked down. Who? The man who was there last night, the one on the pier. I asked Jenna at school if she knew Mr. Garvey, and she said no. She looked at me like I was making him up. Clara's skin prickled. She'd grown up in this town. Everyone knew Pete Garvey. His laugh carried across the wharf. He smoked cigars that made the gulls scatter. But when she thought about him, truly thought about him, his face blurred in her memory, like a photo left too long in the sun. Later that evening, after Sofia was asleep, Clara found herself digging through the library's archives. Dusty ledgers, yellowed obituaries, photographs with edges curled from damp air. Pete Garvey's name wasn't there. Not in the census logs, not in the fishing permits, not in the town's own newspaper clippings. It was as though he'd never existed at all. Clara sat back, chilled by more than the basement air. Havenridge was a town of stories, fishermen's tales, ghost legends told to tourists. She'd grown up hearing them. But this was different. The clock struck 11 upstairs. She told herself she was tired, that her mind was playing tricks. She closed the ledgers, locked the archive, and walked home under a sky pricked with stars. Still, when she lay down in bed, her gaze fell on the alarm clock. She willed herself not to look. But in the hush of night, the red digits flicked forward. 3:03. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Forgotten Fisherman. The fog never lifted. By morning, it wrapped Havenridge like a shroud, softening the clap of boots on dock planks, swallowing voices into damp air. The town moved slower beneath it. Fishermen hauling traps without their usual banter, shopkeepers unlocking doors as if reluctant to be seen. Clara walked Sofia to school, her daughter's hand warm in hers. The girl's usual chatter was absent, her head tilted toward the harbor. When they reached the wharf, Sofia tugged her sleeve and pointed to the pier. "He's not there today," she whispered. Clara crouched to meet her eyes. "Who, sweetheart?" "The man from last night. He was waiting. He saw me." Clara forced a smile. Maybe it was just a dream. But as she looked out over the gray water, she felt that hollow pit in her stomach again, the same one that had opened at 3:03. The library was quieter than usual that morning, only a few regulars lingering. Clara shelved books on autopilot, her mind still on the pier. She nearly jumped when the door opened and Sheriff Olson stepped in, brushing fog from his shoulders. "Morning, Clara." "Sheriff?" She tried to steady her voice. He leaned on the counter, his clipboard tucked under one arm. "You hear about Pete Garvey?" Clara frowned. "No, why?" "Didn't come in with his boat this morning. His crew swore he was out last night, but no one's seen him since. Place is empty, no tracks." Clara's mouth dried. "Maybe he went out early. You know Pete." The sheriff gave a humorless chuckle. "That's the thing. When I checked the logs, I couldn't find his name. No record of his license, no record of his boat. Nothing." "That doesn't make sense," Clara said. "He's lived here his whole life." "Funny how no one seems to remember much about him either." The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly, as though measuring her. Then he straightened. "Well, keep your ears open. Let me know if you hear anything." He left without another word, the door swinging shut behind him. Clara stood still for a long moment, her heart pounding. That evening, after Sofia was asleep, Clara returned to the library archives. The building groaned in the fog, as though the mist itself pressed against its walls. She unlocked the archive room, flipped on the lamp, and pulled the ledgers from a shelf. Her hands trembled as she opened them. Names lined the pages in neat columns, one after another. Garrett, Garrity, Garrison. Then the next name leapt ahead to Gaverly. No Garvey, no Pete. No family, no fishing license. Not crossed out, not even erased. Just absent. The space where he should have been looked wrong, like the world had never bothered to write him in. Clara gripped the table until her knuckles went white. She thought of Pete's laugh booming across the docks, his ever-present cigar, the way he sang old sea shanties when he worked his nets. But when she tried to picture his face, it blurred, as if covered in fog. The hairs on her arms rose. A knock at the door startled her so sharply she nearly dropped the ledger. Clara? Marcus Hale stood in the doorway, camera bag slung over his shoulder. His grin was thin, forced. Knew I'd find you down here. Clara exhaled shakily. Marcus, you scared me. You've heard the whispers, haven't you? He stepped closer, eyes flicking to the open ledger. Clara turned the book toward him. Look, his name is gone. Marcus bent over, squinting. After a moment, he leaned back, running a hand through his hair. So it's not just me. What do you mean? I asked around this morning. Half the docs looked at me like I'd lost my mind when I said his name. The other half, they hesitated, like they wanted to remember but couldn't. Clara's pulse quickened. But you remember him. Marcus nodded slowly. Pieces, his voice maybe, the way he carried himself, but not his face. It's like trying to catch smoke. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a photograph. Here, tell me what you see. Clara held it up to the light. The harbor stretched out under dusk, the pier lit by its single lamp. At the end, beneath the glow, stood a figure leaning against the rail. Beyond him, blurred in the fog, hung a dark smear, dense, shapeless, like a thumbprint pressed onto the world. My editor called it bad exposure, but when I look at it, I feel like I'm 6 years old again, lost at the county fair. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the silent hour. Said not to open the door at 3:03. Said never to say the names you can't remember. Clara's fingers trembled around the photo. He saw us, and now he's taking them. The fog outside thickened, pressing against the window panes. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Frozen Clock. The first thing Clara noticed the next morning was silence. Not the quiet of early dawn, but a silence that pressed against the windows, thick as fog. She stirred in bed, heart thudding. For a moment she thought she was still dreaming, but then her alarm clock's red digits glared back at her. 3:03. She shot upright. No, that couldn't be right. Sunlight leaked pale through the curtains. She tapped the glass of the clock as though it might wake from its stupor. The digits did not change. Downstairs, she found the kitchen clock frozen too. The hands were locked between 3 and 4, unmoving. The wall clock in the library, the one that had chimed the hour since the 70s, sat lifeless when she arrived at work. All of Havenridge seemed to have stopped at the same moment. By noon, the library filled with uneasy chatter. Locals trickled in, pretending to browse, but circling back to the front desk with the same question. Yours stopped too, Clara? Battery must have drained. Funny how mine did at the exact same time. She answered with polite shrugs, but her skin crawled. Each clock she checked told the same story. 3:03, like a scar burned into time. When Marcus arrived carrying 2 coffees and that restless grin of his, he set one in front of her. "Thought you might need this." She eyed him. "Your clock?" "Dead as driftwood. You saw it too, nah?" Clara nodded. Marcus lowered his voice. "I asked around at the harbor. A couple of the older guys swore they felt the harbor hold its breath last night. One said he saw a light in the old lighthouse. Couldn't be. Place has been dark for decades." Clara thought of the pier, of the figure beckoning, and of Sofia's voice carried on the tide. "Maybe it wasn't the lighthouse," she said. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his jacket. It was one of Sofia's drawings, clearly ripped from a notebook. He looked sheepish. "She gave me this morning. She said I should show you." The picture made Clara's stomach knot. In crayon, her daughter had drawn the pier with its single lamp. At the end, beneath the glow, stood the shadowy figure. And above it, in heavy black strokes, a bell tower loomed with a massive clock face. Both hands pointed at 3:03. "She says it's called the Watcher," Marcus said carefully. Clara clenched the paper. She shouldn't know that. That night, Clara tucked Sofia in early, though her daughter's wide eyes lingered on the window. "Will the Watcher come back?" Sofia asked. Clara swallowed. "Not if we stay inside." Sofia hugged her rabbit tighter. "But it wants us to look." Clara kissed her forehead, whispered the rhyme again. "Hold my hand, count to 10. If the wind knocks once, don't let it in," and closed the door. Downstairs, she found Marcus waiting with a lantern. "I borrowed it from the hardware store, on loan. Tonight we checked the lighthouse." Clara hesitated. Every instinct told her to lock the doors, to sit at Sofia's bedside until dawn. But something in her bones said answers waited in the fog. The path to Havenridge Lighthouse wound along jagged rocks, the sea clawing at their edges. The structure itself loomed against the horizon, its once white paint weathered to gray. The bell tower rose like a finger pointing at the stars, silent for longer than Clara had been alive. The door was chained but rusted. Marcus jimmied it loose with a crowbar, and the metal groaned as though protesting. Inside, the air smelled of salt and mildew. Their lantern threw light on graffiti scrawled along the walls, initials carved into stone, bottles abandoned by teenagers daring each other to come this far. But at the base of the tower, beneath the bell itself, Clara saw carvings etched into the stone foundation. Old. Deep. Symbols she didn't recognize. Circles intersecting, a spiral with hands pointing outward, and at the center, the numbers 303. Her fingers brushed the grooves, cold as bone. Marcus shone the light higher. The bell hung above them, massive and silent, its clapper rusted still. Yet as they stood, Clara swore she heard a faint vibration humming through the air, like the ghost of a toll. "You feel that?" Marcus whispered. Clara nodded, her throat tight. "It's waiting." The lantern flickered, shadows lunging across the carvings, and Clara thought for an instant she saw them shift, like the stone itself was breathing. When they finally left, the tide was higher than it should have been, lapping hungrily at the rocks. Clara looked back once at the lighthouse, the bell tower rising against the fog. For a moment, she saw the clock face clear, hands locked at 3:03, before the mist swallowed it whole. At home, she found Sofia sitting awake in bed, eyes fixed on the window. "I heard it," Sofia said softly. Clara sat beside her, heart hammering. "Heard what?" "The bell. It's almost ready." End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Girl on the Pier. The next day, the fog clung to Havenridge like wet wool, rolling in thick from the harbor and smothering the town in its pale grip. Clara drove Sofia to school, headlights cutting no more than a few yards ahead. Her daughter was unusually quiet in the back seat, Rabbit clutched tight in her arms. "Everything okay, Soph?" Clara asked. Sofia's reply came after a pause. "I don't like when it gets this foggy. That's when they come out." Clara gripped the steering wheel. "Who comes out?" "The ones nobody remembers." Clara opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Sofia's voice shifted, brighter, rehearsed. "I'm fine, Mom." She looked out the window, face hidden by curls. Clara said nothing more. At the library, the fog pressed against the windows so thickly it felt like the sea itself was trying to get in. Visitors came in trickles, dripping with mist, their voices low. They checked out paperbacks and left quickly, as if lingering in one place too long would draw something near. Near closing time, the front door creaked open. Clara looked up, expecting a fisherman's wife or a late student. Instead, a teenage girl stepped inside, soaked from the knees down, her long hair stuck in ropes, her sweatshirt plastered to her shoulders. Clara hurried forward. "Are you all right? Do you need a towel?" The girl shook her head. Her eyes were wide and restless, flicking from shelf to shelf. "You're Clara, right?" she asked, voice thin. "I'm Clara. And you are?" "Emily. Emily Kavanaugh. My brother—" Her voice broke, then steadied. "My brother, Daniel, disappeared last year. Out there, on the pier." Clara's skin prickled. She guided the girl to a chair near the desk. "People said Daniel ran away, that he left town." "That's what they think." Emily's eyes brimmed. "But I remember him. I remember everything. He didn't leave. He was taken by the hour." Clara leaned forward. "The silent hour?" Emily nodded, shoulders trembling. "I thought I was crazy. Everyone else forgot him. My mom, my dad, even his best friends. But I still have his things. His jacket, his sketchbook. He existed, Clara. And then, one night, I saw him on the pier, standing under the lamp. He looked right at me, and then he was gone." Clara's heart thudded. "You saw him at 3:03? Emily's gaze sharpened. "You know." Clara hesitated, then told her. About the clocks freezing, about the man on the pier, about Sofia's drawings, about the lighthouse bell. Emily listened, silent but intent, her hands gripping her knees. When Clara finished, she whispered, "It feeds on memory. That's what I think. The hour takes them, and then it eats away at everyone's memories until there's nothing left. But some of us, we're immune. We remember." "Why us?" Clara asked. Emily shook her head. "I don't know, but I've been waiting for someone else who sees it too. And now you're here." That night, Clara couldn't bring herself to sleep. She sat on the porch while the fog curled through Havenridge like a living thing. Emily's words rattled in her head. At 3 a.m., the clock on her nightstand blinked, then froze again at 3:03. Clara rose, moving to Sofia's room. Her daughter was awake, sitting on the bed, eyes fixed on the window. "Is it time?" she whispered. "No, baby, not for us." But then a sound rose from the harbor, faint, mournful like the cry of a horn carried on the fog, and over it, the toll of a bell, so soft So distant, but undeniable. Clara felt Sofia shiver. "They're calling," her daughter murmured. "They want us to remember." End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Lighthouse Bell. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of salt heavy in the air. Havenridge always smelled of the ocean, but this was stronger, acrid, as though the tide had crept into her very walls. She padded to the kitchen, still in her robe, and found Sofia at the table with crayons scattered across a sheet of paper. Clara froze. Her daughter had drawn the lighthouse again. Its tower jagged, its windows dark, but this time the bell was enormous, hanging like an eye above the town. Beneath it, stick figures stood on the pier, their hands raised as though in worship. "Sofia." Clara tried to keep her voice steady. "Why draw this again?" Her daughter didn't look up. "Because it wants me to. It says the bell has to ring." Clara's stomach tightened. "Who says?" Sofia finally raised her eyes, wide and unblinking. "The Watcher." By mid-morning, Clara met Marcus at the Herald office. Emily was already there, hunched in a chair, damp hair tied back, exhaustion etched into her face. Marcus poured them all coffee and spread his notes across the desk. "I asked around. The lighthouse bell hasn't tolled in 50 years. Rusted solid, they said. But," he tapped his notebook, "my grandmother's journals talk about the bell as a warning. She wrote, 'When the hour comes, the bell must toll, or Havenridge will fall into silence forever.'" Emily leaned forward. "That's why I've heard it sometimes, faint, like a dream. Maybe it's still alive." Clara thought of Sofia's drawing, of her daughter whispering about the Watcher. "Then we need to see it again." Marcus grimaced. "We already did. The carvings, the hum. That wasn't enough for you?" Clara's voice shook, but didn't break. "Not when my daughter is drawing things she shouldn't know." The three of them returned to the lighthouse that night. Fog wrapped the cliffs, muting the crash of the waves. Their lantern cast a pale cone ahead, barely enough to cut through the mist. Inside, the air was colder than before. The carvings at the base of the bell seemed deeper, darker, as though time had gnawed them further since their last visit. Emily stared upward. "It's huge," she whispered. "Bigger than I thought." The bell hung in shadow, its bronze mottled green with age. Change trailed from the beams, still strong despite decades of salt air. Clara felt it, before she heard it, a vibration in her ribs. Soft, steady, like the heartbeat of something ancient. Marcus raised the lantern higher. "Tell me you feel that." Emily's voice trembled. "It's waiting for someone to ring it." Clara reached out, fingertips grazing the cold iron of the chain. The hum grew louder, pulsing up her arm. In that moment, she saw flashes. Men in oilskins pulling the chain in rhythm, the bell booming over the harbor, townsfolk kneeling in prayer on the shore. And then she saw them vanish one by one, swallowed into mist. She yanked her hand back. Marcus steadied her. "What did you see?" Clara shook her head. "Not what. Who. Generations. They've all been part of it." The bell gave a faint, metallic groan as though stirred by her touch. Emily flinched, backing toward the wall. "Don't ring it. Please don't." Clara steadied herself, staring up at the bell's dark belly. If it's the only thing holding back the hour, maybe that's exactly what we have to do. That night, back at home, Clara tucked Sofia in again. Her daughter pressed her face into the rabbit's worn fur, voice muffled. "Did you see it, Mom?" Clara's throat tightened. "See what?" "The bell. It's so lonely. It's been waiting a long, long time." Clara sat on the edge of the bed, fingers cold against the quilt. For the first time, she didn't try to comfort her daughter. She just listened. The faint hum of the lighthouse still in her bones as the clock on her nightstand flicked forward. 3:03. And somewhere out on the cliffs, the bell gave a hollow, aching sigh. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Tidekeeper's Journal. The fog refused to lift the next day. Havenridge lay muted beneath its pale weight. Colors drained to gray, voices muffled as though spoken through water. Clara walked Sofia to school in silence, her daughter's small hand cool in hers. Each house they passed looked abandoned, windows fogged from within. When she dropped Sofia off, Clara lingered by the schoolyard fence. Children played tag, their laughter thin, brittle. She noticed one boy standing apart, hands in his pockets, watching the others. She thought she recognized him, then realized she couldn't recall his name. When she asked another parent, the woman blinked, puzzled. "What boy?" she said. Clara felt a chill race down her spine. At the Herald office, Marcus had spread old newspapers across the table, their headlines curling at the edges. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, sifting through boxes of yellowed records. "I found something," Marcus said when Clara entered. His voice was taut, like a string drawn too tight. He slid a cracked leather book toward her. The cover bore a faded inscription, Journal of the Tidekeeper, 1843. Clara opened it with careful hands. The pages smelled of brine and smoke. The ink faded to sepia. The handwriting was tight, deliberate. An entry dated March 6th, 1843, said, "The keeper of hours came to me in the fog. He offered a pact, safe waters, bountiful harvests, in exchange for memory. Each generation will give what is asked, and the town will thrive." She read aloud, her voice low. Emily shivered. Marcus leaned closer. The Tidekeeper wasn't talking about tides. He was talking about time. Clara flipped to the next page. "The bells shall toll to hold the hour at bay, but the hour is patient. It will come when forgotten." Her pulse quickened. "The bell was meant to protect us." Marcus nodded grimly. "And when it stopped ringing, the hour crept in." Emily's hands shook as she unfolded an old photograph from between the pages. It showed a group of men in oilskins standing before the lighthouse, lanterns raised. Behind them, faint and blurred, was a figure in the fog. Its face was indistinct, but its shape was unmistakable. Tall, still, watching. "The Watcher," Emily whispered. That night, Clara sat at her kitchen table with the journal open before her. The house was quiet, Sofia asleep upstairs, but the words pressed on her like weights. "We toll the bell at the hour, lest Havenridge be swallowed. 3 strikes for memory, 3 for blood, 3 for the sea. Thus the pact is kept." She traced the ink with her finger. 3, 3, 3. The rhythm matched the frozen digits on every clock in town. 3:03. She pushed the journal away, heart pounding. She wanted to wake Sofia, to pack a bag, to leave Havenridge before the hour claimed them all. But the thought of driving inland felt foolish, impossible. The hour wasn't bound to the harbor. It lived in the bones of the town, in the air they breathed. The faint hum came again then, vibrating through the walls. At first, she thought it was a truck on Main Street or the dryer in the basement. But when she looked at the clock on the wall, its hands shuddered forward, then froze at the same impossible time. 3:03. The bell tolled. Faint, distant, but undeniable. And upstairs, Sofia's voice drifted down the stairs. "They're coming for us, Mom." Clara's blood grew cold. She sprinted up the stairs 2 at a time. Sofia sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes wide, staring at the corner of the room where the shadows seemed too deep. "There," she whispered. Clara followed her gaze. For just an instant, she thought she saw the outline of a man, thin, patient, waiting, before the darkness folded in on itself and vanished. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7. Into the Silent Hour. The fog thickened that night until it seemed the whole town was drowning in it. Street lamps glowed as weak orbs, halos swallowed by gray. Clara stood on her porch with Marcus and Emily, the Tidekeeper's journal tucked under her arm. "We can't keep waiting for it to come to us," Marcus said. "The journal's clear enough. The hour comes when forgotten. But what happens if we go into it on purpose?" Emily hugged herself tighter. "That's crazy!" Clara looked back at the house. Sofia was asleep inside, or at least Clara prayed she was. Every night it became harder to tell. She faced them again, voice steady. "If it's hunting her, then I need to see it. With my own eyes. I won't just sit here." Marcus nodded, jaw set. "Then we go together." They reached the pier just before 3. The boards creaked beneath their boots, the fog curling like smoke around their legs. The single lamp at the end pulsed, faintly, as though bracing itself. Emily clutched Clara's sleeve. "Once it starts, there's no going back. My brother, he never came out." Clara squeezed her hand. "Stay close. Don't look away." The second Marcus's watch ticked toward 3:03, everything shifted. Sound collapsed. The gulls silenced, the waves stilled. Even the boards beneath their feet seemed to hold their breath. The air turned syrupy, thick, making each motion feel delayed. And then the world changed. The pier stretched farther into the fog than it should. Boats bobbed in the harbor, but their lines hung slack, untethered, swaying without wind. Lanterns dotted the water like floating stars, too bright, too steady. Clara's heart pounded. "We're inside it." Marcus lifted his camera. But when he tried to click the shutter, the mechanism jammed, frozen. His breath puffed white in the air. Emily whimpered, pointing. "There!" Figures drifted among the lanterns. Not walking, not swimming, gliding, their outlines blurred, men in oilskins, women in long dresses, children with vacant faces. They were translucent, as if made of mist, but their eyes glowed faintly with recognition. "Daniel," Emily whispered. A boy shape paused on the water, looking straight at her. His mouth moved, though no sound reached them. Emily stumbled forward, but Clara caught her arm. "Don't!" Clara hissed. The boy's face flickered, blurred, and then he was gone. From the shadows at the end of the pier, another figure emerged. Taller, sharper, solid where the others were not. Its face was obscured, but Clara knew it instantly. The Watcher. It raised one hand, pointing directly at Clara. Behind her, Marcus whispered, "It knows you." The lanterns on the water flared. A sound like rushing wind filled the silence, 1,000 whispers crowding into her skull. Clara staggered, clutching her ears. She saw flashes. Sofia standing on the pier, eyes empty. The lighthouse bell swinging, silent though it moved. The entire town of Havenridge erased, replaced by still water. Emily screamed. Clara spun to see her halfway down the pier, her body already dimming at the edges, as though the hour were peeling her away. "No!" Clara lunged, seizing Emily's arm. The moment their skin touched, Emily solidified again, gasping. "Don't let go!" Clara cried. "It feeds when we're alone." The Watcher tilted his head, curious, then lowered his hand as if testing their strength. The bell tolled. Not in the real world. Here. Inside the silent hour. A single note, deep and hollow, rippled through the fog. The figures on the water shuddered, turning their blank faces toward the sound. Clara felt the vibration in her chest, the same hum from the lighthouse walls. The Watcher's form flickered, its outline breaking apart in the toll's wake. Marcus's voice was hoarse. "That's it! The bell weakens it!" The Watcher straightened again, reforming, eyes like voids fixed on Clara. It took one step closer. The lanterns dimmed. Clara's watch ticked forward. 3:04. The silent hour collapsed like shattered glass, the world snapping back into sound and motion. They stood alone on the pier, the fog rolling away, the lamp steady above them. The water lapped quietly at the pilings, as if nothing had happened. Emily was sobbing, Marcus pale and shaking. Clara turned toward the town. Every window was dark, every street silent, and deep in her bones, she knew the hour hadn't let them go. It had only marked them. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. Broken Memories. The morning after their descent into the silent hour, Clara woke with a start. Sunlight pushed through the curtains, yet the room felt wrong, unfamiliar. She sat up, scanning the space. The photo on her dresser, her and Sofia at the beach, was missing. In its place stood an empty frame, the glass dusty, the outline of where a picture had once been faintly visible. Clara's stomach dropped. She tore through the drawers, the bookshelf, the hallway. No photo. When she reached Sofia's room, she froze. "Good morning, Mom," Sofia said sleepily, rubbing her eyes. But there was something in her gaze that chilled Clara. A gap. A sliver of emptiness, as though something essential had been removed. "What's your middle name, Soph?" Clara asked suddenly. Sofia frowned. "Middle name? You know, I gave it to you." Her daughter blinked, puzzled. "I don't have one." Clara staggered back. Her daughter had always been Sofia Isabel Reyes, but the name had slipped through her fingers like smoke. At the Herald office, Marcus was pale and shaken. He spread his notes across the desk, but the pages were nearly blank. The names he'd written, Pete Garvey, Daniel Kavanaugh, had faded to smudges. Only the word Watcher remained, scrawled in heavy strokes. "I wrote everything down," Marcus said, his voice rough. "I know I did. And now it's gone." Clara told him about the missing photo, about Sofia's middle name dissolving. Emily sat across from them, her face hollow. She whispered, "My brother's voice. I used to hear it when I dreamed, clear as day. Last night, it was muffled, like he was underwater. When I woke up, I couldn't remember the sound at all." Clara rubbed her temples. The journal said the hour feeds on memory. It's not just taking people, it's erasing them from us piece by piece. Marcus nodded grimly. "And it's accelerating. The more we resist, the more it eats." That evening, Clara searched the library archives again, but the ledgers were emptier than before. Names blotted out, whole families excised from the records. Where there had been neat rows of handwriting, now there was only blank space. She leaned against the shelves, shaking. A movement caught her eye. Sofia, sitting cross-legged on the archive floor, her rabbit in her lap. Clara rushed to her. "Soph, how did you get here?" "I followed you," the girl said simply. Then she held up a book. "I found this." Clara froze. It wasn't a children's book, but another old ledger, older than the others. The handwriting was cramped, the ink nearly faded away, but in the margin, in a child's uneven scrawl, someone had written, "Do not forget me." Clara's throat tightened. She touched the words, her hand trembling. "Who wrote this?" she whispered. "The ones who went away. They're trying to stay." Later that night, Clara sat awake by the window, staring at the pier through the fog. She held the journal in her lap, the words swimming. She tried to focus, to commit them to memory, but sentences slipped as she read them, as though the page itself was rewriting. She forced herself to recall Sofia's full name, whispering it under her breath. Sofia Isabel Reyes. Sofia Isabel Reyes. The harder she repeated it, the more wrong it felt. When the clock blinked to 3:03, the room stilled. Clara pressed her palms to her temples. The shadows deepened, and in the corner, she saw Emily. Not the Emily she'd been sitting with hours ago, but a faded version, translucent, her lips forming words Clara couldn't hear. "Emily?" Clara gasped. The girl looked at her, eyes wide with desperation, then flickered, like a candle about to go out. Clara lunged forward, but the image dissolved. Her heart thundered. Emily wasn't just losing memories. She was being unwritten. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Watcher's Bargain. Clara couldn't shake the vision of Emily flickering into nothing. By morning, she hurried to Marcus's office, praying she'd find the girl waiting there, alive, solid. Emily sat slumped in a chair, pale and trembling. Her outline seemed thinner somehow, as if the light passed through her more than it should. When she looked up, her eyes were hollow with exhaustion. "I don't know how much longer I have," she whispered. "It's pulling me apart. Every night more of me slips into the hour." Marcus paced behind her, fists clenched. "There has to be a way to stop it. The journal said the bell could hold it back. Maybe we ring it?" Clara shook her head. Ring it? And risk what? The pact was made for memory and blood. If the bell rings wrong, maybe the hour takes everyone. Emily shuddered. Maybe that's what it wants, for us to try. That night, Clara sat by Sofia's bed. Her daughter clutched her rabbit, but her gaze was far away, fixed on the ceiling. "Mom?" she said softly. "Yes, baby?" The watcher talked to me again. Clara's chest constricted. What did it say? Sofia turned, eyes shining in the dim light. It wants me. If you give me to it, it promises to give everything else back. All the people, all the names, even the ones we've forgotten. Clara's blood turned cold. No. It said you'd understand. It said you already knew the pact. Clara hugged her close, shaking. Don't listen. It lies. But deep inside, Clara knew the watcher wasn't lying about the bargain. The pact in the Tidekeeper's journal had always demanded something. At 3:03, the room froze. The lamp on Sofia's nightstand flickered, shadows thickening in the corners. Clara held her daughter tight, her heart pounding as the air bent and thickened. The watcher stood in the doorway. It was taller than she remembered, its form sharper, more solid. The face was still hidden, but Clara felt its gaze pierce through her. When it spoke, the voice was not sound, but vibration, filling her bones. Give her to me, and the town is restored. Refuse, and Havenridge will be forgotten, piece by piece, until even you are gone. Clara's arms tightened around Sofia. You'll never have her. The watcher tilted his head. Then watch them fade. Behind him, the hallway rippled. Pictures on the walls went blank. The carpet beneath Clara's feet paled, threads unraveling into gray mist. Marcus's voice shouted through the house, "Clara, don't look at it!" She turned her head. Marcus stood in the doorway, flashlight beam cutting through the fog. Emily was beside him, but dimmer, her form half transparent, her lips moving soundlessly. The watcher stepped closer. Clara forced herself to her feet, Sofia clinging to her. "What if we ring the bell?" she demanded. "Would that break you?" The watcher's silence was answer enough. Its form shuddered, edges blurring. "Ring it," the voice vibrated, low and dangerous, "and Havenridge dies with me." Her chest burned with fear, but also clarity. The pact was never about safety. It was about control. And now it wanted her to choose between her child and her town. She lifted her chin, her voice trembling but firm. "I will never give her to you." The watcher's hand rose, long fingers stretching towards Sofia. The bell tolled. Not faint this time, but thunderous, rattling the windows. The watcher recoiled, its form splintering into shards of shadow. The sound rang again, deep and aching, as though something in the lighthouse had awakened. Emily screamed, her body flickering violently. Marcus lunged to hold her, but his arms closed round nothing. Clara's ears rang with the fading toll. The watcher steadied, its form reforming, more furious than before. "You can't win," she whispered. But her heart hammered with a dangerous thought. Maybe the only way forward was to try. And to toll the bell herself. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Tolling Bell. The night the bell awoke, Havenridge itself seemed to fracture. The fog pressed so thick it seeped through cracks in doors, curling across floors like smoke. Every clock in town blinked the same frozen digits, 3:03. Clara stood at the base of the lighthouse with Marcus and Emily. Sofia clutched her hand, Rabbit limp in her other arm. The Tidekeeper's journal was tucked against Clara's chest. Its words burned into her mind. 3 strikes for memory, 3 for blood, 3 for the sea. The watcher loomed at the edge of the cliff, a figure of darkness more solid than the stone beneath their feet. It raised its hand, pointing once more at Sofia. Marcus's jaw clenched. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. Clara nodded. We ring it together. Inside, the lighthouse groaned with age. The air was sharp with rust and salt. The great bell hung above them, immense and still. The chains dangled down, slick with damp, waiting. Clara placed Sofia in Emily's trembling arms. Stay with her. No matter what happens, don't let her go. Emily nodded, her outline faint but determined. Marcus grasped one chain, Clara the other. The watcher's presence pressed against the walls, filling the tower with a vibration that rattled their teeth. Ready? Marcus asked. Clara swallowed, her voice barely audible. 3 times. Together, they pulled. The bell groaned, then tolled. The sound reverberated like thunder underwater, rolling out across the harbor. The watchers staggered, its form splintering around them. Ghostly figures shrieked silently, their outlines twisting in the lantern glow. They pulled again. The second strike shuddered through the stone, shaking dust from the rafters. Names whispered through Clara's head, names she had forgotten. Pete Garvey, Daniel Kavanagh, neighbors erased from memory. She gasped as they surged back, fragments of lives she thought lost. The watcher bellowed, a soundless roar, its shape flickering between presence and absence. One more, Marcus cried. They pulled with everything they had. The third toll split the night. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. The watcher shrieked, its form unraveling into strips of shadow that tore apart in the sound wave. The ghostly figures dissolved, drifting like smoke back into the sea. The bell's echo faded, leaving only the crash of waves and the rasp of their own breathing. Clara spun towards Sofia. The girl was safe in Emily's arms, but Emily herself was fading fast, her outline nearly gone. No, Clara whispered, reaching for her. Emily smiled faintly, her voice thinner than mist. It needed someone. It needed me. Emily! But before Clara could move, Emily released Sofia gently, then flickered once, twice, and was gone. Only the rabbit tumbled into Clara's arms. Marcus bowed his head. The lighthouse groaned, its bell silent once more. By dawn, Havenridge seemed whole again. The fog lifted, the clocks ticked forward, the town stirred. People greeted one another in the streets, oblivious to what had almost erased them. Pete Garvey's boat was moored at the dock, as though it had always been there. Children played, their laughter bright. Only Clara, Marcus, and Sofia remembered the hour. On the walk home, Sofia clutched her rabbit tight. Is it over, Mom? Clara looked out at the sea. The lighthouse stood dark against the horizon. For the first time in years, its silence felt uneasy. It's sleeping, Clara said quietly. But sleep isn't forever. Sofia slipped her hand into hers, her eyes fixed on the distant bell tower. The air was clear, the sun rising, but deep in her bones she knew the truth. The silent hour wasn't gone. It was waiting. End of chapter 10 and end of story. Like and subscribe for more thrilling and suspenseful stories from Havenridge. See you back soon.